really feeling how we are all together this Yom Kippur, though I know we are longing to physically be together. There is sweetness in this Zoom universe together. It is good. 13 years ago, my close friend arrived a couple of minutes early for a small birthday party at a cafe and quickly whispered into my ear, "Hey, when people come tonight, refer to me as he. Okay?" I could feel the fear and the power in his voice in these words whispered so quickly into my ear, just as people were walking in. I wanted to stop and to bust out into a big ritual moment, but that's not what he was asking of me. He was asking of me to refer to him as he. And I knew all of the strength that it took to get here. And I felt the power in those quick words in my ear. Recently, we were talking about that time together. We were looking back at it, and I was holding space as he was reflecting what that time meant for him. He shared about all the pain and the shame he had to wade through for years to come to the moment when he decided, in his words, to jump. There was so much keeping him on that ledge, but it was time to jump. I know that it doesn't seem like that long ago, 13 years ago, but it was, and how all of us made room and made space for this kind of change. He said that he knew he had to jump off. It was like waiting on the edge of the diving board, he said, with all the kids lined up behind him at the swimming pool. The fear floods you, but you have to jump. Have you experienced a moment in your life where you had to jump? You were on a precipice. You knew you were going to jump into where you were headed. It was time to change, or it was time to leave, or it was time to try a new way, or to make a full commitment. And a special kind of fear filled you. An energy and a fear all wrapped into one. A fear that touched into the sacred. Was there a time that you looked over a precarious edge of a canyon or a mountaintop and you felt the exhilarated fear filled with awe? Can you remember that moment now? Can you feel what it's like in your body? Yom Kippur, today, this day, is a holy, sacred day, the culmination of the days of awe. Yamim Noraim. Awe. Nora. Yirah. Awe. We are to experience and immerse ourselves, soak ourselves in awe in these days so that they continue throughout our year. And to bring that awe into our lives all year round. Our tradition asks us to cultivate awe as a daily practice, as an approach to living. We have two stances in our approach to the divine, Yirat Hashem and Ahavat Hashem. We talked about Ahava earlier, love of God, that Ahava Rabbah, the abundant love, the never-ending holding us love. Torah is an act of loving, the gift of Torah, an act of loving. And this other one, Yirat, fear, awe. I know there are big differences in those two words that I have just said, fear and awe. And often you can tell what denomination of Judaism it is by how they translate Yirah. But I want to sit with both today and not push either part of Yirah out. Today, this morning, right now, we are going to jump inside of the midah of Yirah, the soul trait, the value of Yirah, as we in Nefesh are a midot-driven community. And this Yirah, I notice, is one that as we choose together on Rosh Hashanah, our tradition is to choose a midah to focus on for the year. And every month we have our monthly check-ins, and I do a different midah every month. I notice that not many people run towards Yirah. So I want to open it this year, because this year is such a year for fear and awe. Such a year for fear and awe this year. Let's enter into Yirah and excavate its landscape and its offering to us. I know that when we think about fear, we think about it as maybe only something bad, something to get away from. But I want to draw out that there are different kinds of fear, and they have offerings for us. There is another word for fear in Hebrew, pachad, fear. It's fear, dread, anxiety, fear about something you think is to come. Pachad, fear, anxiety, fear, dread. I think that is mostly what we are thinking about when we hear the English word fear. There's so much of this kind of fear right now, so much pachad fear. It's just drenching us. Sometimes I feel like we're just dripping with this fear from all around us. Rabbi Alan Liu, of blessed memory, shares that one of the most common opening words from God in Torah when addressing us is to say, Al tirei, don't be afraid. But this is not pachad. This, al tirei, is the norah, the yirah kind of fear, the kind of fear that touches the sacred. And Rabbi Liu says that it's not obvious always why, when God is first addressing us, we hear al tirei. Except that Rabbi Liu says that it's God acknowledging that simply the nearness of the sacred in those moments can generate an intensity, an energy. The nearness of an energy gives to us a sense of spaciousness that we're not accustomed to, a mixture of fear and awe. That is Yirah, the mixture of fear and awe. It is a fear when we find ourselves able to inhabit a larger space than we are used to inhabiting. There's more spaciousness now. A fear that brings with it a new strength. A new strength announces itself. A new energy bristles through our bodies, and we call this bristling of energy, this electric energy, norah, yirah. It is trying to push us open. We can choose how we relate to the different kinds of fear. Consciousness, choice. That's why we do, one of the reasons why we do spiritual practice, consciousness, choice. In these times of deep reckoning inside of ourselves, in our community, in our nation, our world, around health, around racism, around democracy, around patriarchy, the economy, climate, survival, and on, we must be conscious of how we are shifting fear, transitioning, ending, beginnings. We are in now, endings and beginnings and transitionings, and part of that is the shifting of the fear so that it touches into the sacred, so that we can feel the possibilities opening. The possibilities for our lives, for our society. Yes, it's also scary. Yes, it's disconcerting. Yes, there's disequilibrium. But now is the time to use the growing edge of the disconcerting, discombobulated fear and to move that into a transformed spaciousness of all that is possible. new directions we can collectively and personally head off into as we take the moment to jump off the precipice. We have a choice of how we approach fear. Many of us are living in pachad, fear, as the main driver of our lives right now. So let's take a moment for self-reflection. Is the fear, dread, anxiety, pachad, fear, is it driving your life right now? If that is all you need to get this Yom Kippur, fantastic. Coming to awareness of what is driving you. And I want to be honest, this fear is also in our tradition. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. In fact, there is a strain of our tradition that elevates this pachad, fear, as a fear of sin, as a way to keep us away from things we shouldn't do. There's a verse in Proverbs, in Mishlei, fortunate is the man that fears always. Ashrei Adam mifached tamid, who fears in the pachad way always. It is present in our tradition, and I'll be clear here. I reject that kind of fear. That strain of our tradition, I reject. I am not looking to cultivate in you a daily anxious fear in order to live ethical lives. We can be grounded in what we do want, to be grounded in our ethical lives. But this tradition is here. And there are times for pachad, fear. Fear of COVID can lead us to putting on a mask. That's a good fear. A good anxiety about the future. Fear of total destruction of our planet should lead us to taking care of our earth and getting rid of the toxins and the chemicals that create cancers and illness and total destruction. That kind of fear can move us into action, but it is not a daily life stance. It is not the daily practice that we want to cultivate. It increases anxiety, pain, hurt, diminishes, smalling us, undercutting our ability to live fully. Pachad, it has a place, but not as the driver. And I think it's worthwhile to make the distinction in the fears. Yirah, a fear and an awe that comes when we are cultivating the possibilities, the energy, and the spaciousness. That is something to cultivate. Awe as a life stance. And many of you are cultivating this energy and spaciousness and big bursting forwards in new ways in your life. One of the great joys of getting to be your rabbi in my role is hearing from you the ways that you are doing this. You all inspire me so deeply. And I can tell you that the stories you tell me are not easy stories. They are not about a sweet, easy breeze walk through the park and now you're ready to do some life transforming. The pathways we walk that lead us into Yirah are often, most often, challenging. They come from doing the often challenging internal work of the soul. Yirah and pachad. Let's go a little deeper into Yirah now that we've defined it as this possibility of fear, awe. There are 3 pathways to enter into Yirah. In fact, I would say there are many pathways to enter into Yirah. But this morning I want to share with you 3. 3 ways we can get into a deeper Yirah. And they are fear of or experience of death, belonging, becoming. Our relationship to death, belonging, becoming are pathways that very much lead us into fear, Yirah. I know that 2 of them may sound a little more inviting. Since death is often something we run from, and in fact, much of our culture is trying to get us to run from the reality of death and dying, to hide from them. But we have this opportunity to become intimate in a way that opens up our lives. We can befriend the three of these, move near to them, karov, draw near to them, be near and familiar, and put them in service of our lives, in service of our values. Not hijacking and taking over our lives, but in service of them. So let's open each one. Death. The great fear, inviting us to come to know it so that we can connect more deeply to life. It is one that ancient traditions connect with and that our modern society spends much time and energy trying to get us to deny, avoid, or hide, and fill with things, shiny things, always more things to buy, always more material to have in this culture. We don't need things. We need truth. We need drawing near to what our ancient cultures know. Our rabbis over the centuries intentionally elevate this fear. In fact, this is much as what we're doing on Yom Kippur. Who will live? Who will die? There's a tradition to wear a kittel, which is the garment that we're wrapped in when we die. In fact, they give us Yom Kippur as a kind of get close to it. Get it right here. Rehearse it. Not to freak you out. Not to freak you out. I want to say that again. Instead, to draw us more deeply into our lives. When we are faced with death, to draw more deeply into our lives and to align more solidly with our deepest values. That's why they give us these days. That's why we do not run from the reality of death and dying. Last night I spoke of grief and mourning, and that is an important place around loss, but this is different. This is Yirah, fear and awe around facing the reality of our own deaths. To be with it, to come to peace with it. I felt deeply this fear, awe in Audre Lorde's Cancer Diaries. Audre Lorde of blessed memory, the great Black lesbian poet and thinker, wrote about her experiences with cancer. A year before she was diagnosed with cancer, she faced the possibility with a biopsy. That time it was not malignant, but a year later when she had the biopsy again, it was. She says, "So this fall I met cancer, as it were from a considered position, but it still knocked me for a hell of a loop, having to deal with the pain and the fear and the death I had thought I had come to terms with once before. But I did not recognize then how many faces those terms had, nor how many forces were aligned within our daily structures against them, nor how often I would have to redefine the terms because other experiences kept presenting themselves. The acceptance of death as a fact, rather than the desire to die, can empower my energies with a forcefulness and vigor not always possible, with a forcefulness and vigor not always possible when one eye is out unconsciously for eternity. A forcefulness and a vigor. The acceptance of death as a fact, not the desire to die. Michael Hebb, the founder of Death Over Dinner and the End of Life Collective, says that this work in coming to know death reveals ourselves to ourselves and to each other. The work of coming to know death reveals ourselves to ourselves and to each other. He also shares that something new is happening in human history, something that has not happened before. Our ancient cultures have lots of beautiful containers for drawing us near to death and for helping with mourning and grieving. And there's a new reality. Most of us will have our deaths announced before we die. We will be told that in some time, this situation that's developing in your body will lead you to death. In ancient times, you just died. And so this means we have this possibility of a whole deepening practice of coming to know death in a new way and in an ancient way. This intimacy with the reality of death is at the heart of coming to connect more fully with life, with the joy and beauty of living. Those of us who have faced this reality, the reality of our death, face to face, panim al panim, face to face, it opens us in ways we never expected. I can tell you that my facing of this fear face to face brought an incredible lightness of being and a change in so many aspects of my life, including being right here in this moment with all of you as we are making this community together. This facing is at the heart of coming to connect more fully with life and joy and beauty, going deep into the marrow of the bones of living, into the awe of life through the awe of death. The second one is belonging. We are relational, communal creatures. Oh boy, we are feeling that now. We need each other. The fear of not belonging, of being isolated, of cut off and rejected, it's a primal fear. There is a profound pain in the ethos of individualism that's at the core of our dominant culture that leaves many not having the community support that we all need to thrive. We need community. And then, unfortunately, when we do try to reach out, this ethos of competition often makes it hard to find belonging in the places we are trying to find it. And it can lead us into a pachad fear of not belonging, of never belonging. And so then we end up doing things and morphing ourselves to try and fit into some idea of what will belong. To that. How we have felt the need for connection in these times. In this time of social distancing, we need belonging. How are you getting the need for connection right now? How are you finding belonging? I've heard from you about how being part of this community meets that need. And we welcome those of you who are new to join us in belonging into Nefesh. I've heard from you how you've connected with your neighbors in deeper ways, how you've reached out to friends you haven't talked to in years, how you've come to know others who are working to help the world, that you're stepping into learning about racial justice has moved you into community in new ways, into social justice, economic justice. You are finding community in these ways. Finding new communities. I've also heard your longing for connection, your need to connect more in these times. We can move into belonging as an awe of belonging. Rather than the pachad fear that says we will never belong, we move into belonging as an awe, as an electric energy and spaciousness as we take action to move into the awe of belonging. The third is becoming. The fear that when we draw near to it, that we need to be known. We need to be known. It touches into the sacred need to be known, seen, and understood. Becoming. We need to be known, seen, and understood. The fear of becoming who we really are can be a pachad fear. It can also be a Yirah fear. Oh, how I've heard from you. Some of you in this COVID time, as you've come into yourself, you have found places where you are longing to become. Places in your identity that are like, hello, I've been waiting for you to slow down and see me. And maybe there are people in your home or in your life who are doing that to you now. Hello, I know that you think that you know me, and you do. We know the people we love, and also we don't know them. And there's always room for them to say, hey, come to see me again, anew. Come into this awe of becoming. Come into the awe of becoming. Just the other day, we had a Zoom of holding space in these days of awe to hear what was alive for you. And we had a new participant who was new to coming to Nefesh. And she said that she was coming because she wanted to learn more about her Judaism. She was 92 years old and she wanted to learn more about her Judaism. Into the awe of becoming. We are always growing, expanding into the awe of becoming. Now you may be just in these first steps where you're calling to be seen. The first steps up to that edge, up to that precipice, getting ready to jump into the awe of becoming. So coming to know each of these aspects, drawing near to them, befriending them, and intimacy with death, belonging and becoming, and how they shape our lives. This is an opening into Yirah. When we connect into these three, we have the possibility of that electric energy, of that greater spaciousness, of that deeper connection to life, to God, to other humans, to ourselves. Oh, Rabbi, how do we do this? How do we do this? Well, let's look at a moment when it happened for our people. And what did we do in that moment? That moment was when we were gathered at the edge of the sea, right? We remember that moment. We left the narrow place. We were literally on a precipice. We needed to jump, but it was just water in front of us, and it was scary. Rabbi Lou comes to say, pay attention to the verbs that came in that moment when we were afraid to jump, to walk forward into the water. Al tireu, there it is again. The Yirah, the Nora, something sacred is happening. See what is happening, Ir'u. See what is happening before you. Collect yourselves. Hityatvu, collect yourselves. Moses is telling the people, quiet down, hold your peace. Tacharishun, hold your peace. So the first steps we learn from Torah is to quiet down, to hold our peace, to collect ourselves. When we feel that electric energy coming, sometimes we want to push it down and do anything other than getting quiet. Run. The first message to Moses is quiet down. Oh, such a blessing. Thank you, Moses. But then God steps in and says, actually, there's one more thing. There's one more thing. Yes, we need to be quiet. But in a very strong moment, God says, this is the time now to get going. In fact, God says, don't just stand there calling out to me. Do something. Move forward. Jump off of that precipice. Yes, be still. Collect yourselves. Get to the quiet. But then it is time. V'yisa'u, God tells us. Get going. There is a time for quiet, and there is a time for new actions. You can draw near to these places of becoming and death and belonging. And you can do that as a centered, meditative, quiet practice. And it will expand you and bring you great depth. But it is not the whole story. The next part is the actions that you will take motivated from that place. By the end of this Yom Kippur, I would like for you to write down or to tell somebody in words 3 actions you are committing to take. 3 actions you are committing to take. In this next days as we enter into the next year or in the next months, that come from a place of spaciousness, that come from a place of fear, awe, and possibility and more room. It could be more room for yourself. It could be more room that you're going to make for others. It could be more room you're going to make for the world, for justice in the world. It is good to be quiet in spiritual practice. It is also good to act. And when we do, friends, the last place in Yirah is the awe. The awe. The fear awe brings us to the awe. to the awe and the wonder. When we get the quiet and we take the actions, we break into the awe. The Yirah, what Rabbi Heschel of blessed memory calls radical amazement. Radical amazement and wonder with all we see and behold. With all we see and behold. Rabbi Heschel says the beginning of awe is wonder. And the beginning of wisdom is awe. Radical amazement has a wider scope than any other act of humans. Grandeur and mystery is something we are confronted with everywhere and at all times. When we work with the fear awe, we transform into the awe. And that is a life stance. That is what we cultivate daily. This radical amazement is a stance for life. Our tradition asks us to stand in a stance of awe, of wonder as we approach the world. It's why we have prayer. It's why we have blessings. We bless everything. We bless the apple and the honey and the bread and the rainbow and the newness and the first time and these special days and Shabbat and the candles. We bless all the time. We bless because we want to always be in awe and radical amazement. These days of awe, Yamim Noraim, there are asking to now saturate ourselves, to be dripping with awe. I have said how all around us it's dripping with the anxious fear. We want to be dripping with the radical amazement awe. It is what we are doing in these holy days, is what we do daily. Daily, always wonder, awe, amazement. Amazement to see your faces. Amazement in our beautiful round bellies. Amazement in our aging bodies. Amazement in the same house, the same street, every day looking slightly new. Amazement in our world and the possibility of transformation that comes from awe. Amazement how in this time of fear we can transform our lives and our society. Yirah invites this transformation, an invitation to become intimate with the possibilities. I give you this invitation to become intimate with the possibilities inside of death, belonging, and becoming. To get intimate and open to awe as a life stance. May these days of awe continue into our year and lead us to pursue fear, awe, and radical amazement in every day of this year. Good Yantif, Shana Tova.
Reflecting light, I rode the pain down, got off and looked up, looked into your eyes, the lost hope give up the ground under your feet. Hold on to nothing for good. Turn and run at the mean dogs chasing you. Stand alone and misunderstood. And now that I've worn out the world, I'm on my knees in fascination, looking through the night. Now the moon's never seen me before, but I'm reflecting light. No, the moon's never seen me before, but I'm reflecting